Bottomline Africa. And today, at least 10 million people around the world are denied a nationality. As a result, they often aren't allowed to go to school, see a doctor, get a job, open a bank account, buy a house, or even get married. Now, stateless people may have difficulty accessing basic rights such as education, healthcare, employment, and freedom. So the question is, what is being done to take care of stateless persons around the continent? Tonight, I'm together with two individuals who have experience in this field. I have Diana Gishengo in studio. She is a program manager with the Kenya Human Rights Commission. And joining me via Skype all the way from Nakuru, Kenya is Catherine Harmon-Sharp. She is from the UNHCR. Good evening, ladies, and welcome to the program.
Yeah.
Now, Diana, let me begin with you. First of all, there's a problem that does not only affect Africans, it affects so many other peoples across the world. The number that has been put of stateless persons across the world now is at 10 million. I don't know if the figures have changed. Now, first of all, being stateless is like, belonging to nowhere. What does this exactly mean to the 10 million plus people out there?
Thank you very much, Yusuf, for having me and Catherine to speak on this pertinent issue. So being stateless means you are not recognized as a citizen of any country in the world. It therefore means in legal terms, in terms of a country and the whole world planning, you do not exist. You're not, whereas there are refugees who are stateless, you're a human being, but you cannot get any protection of the state. You cannot get the rights that ordinarily would be accorded to a child or an adult in a particular state. And just like you've said, you therefore cannot get basic services like health. You won't be able to access education. You won't be able to travel, particularly outside the boundaries of the country where you find yourself stateless in. Sometimes it also means, in some other countries, you're able to go to school, study, and do all that, but then you cannot engage in processes like voting. You cannot vie for a position. So that's on an elevated level where those countries recognize and feel that everybody in their country should lead a certain dignified life. But where that does not apply, like most African countries, in most of Asia and in parts of Southern America, then you will find these communities, and they are in their millions. When the last statistics provided by UNHCR put stateless persons at 10 million, and this had factored a population of 1 million stateless persons in Africa. 700 of these were documented in Ivory Coast. There are those who were documented in Kenya and those who were documented in DRC. But there are many other Africans who are stateless, like in the Eritreans, the Ethiopians of Eritrean descent who are in Ethiopia, and there are hundreds of thousands.
Yes, we're going to go into detail shortly, Diana. Okay. Thanks for that. And speaking about UNHCR, we have Catherine, who is a representative of UNHCR with me, and she's joining us via Skype once again from Nakuru, Kenya. Now, Catherine, if you could hear me, perhaps these are people, already as Diana have mentioned, who are often vulnerable to exploitation, including slavery. Some of them are subject to human traffickers. So perhaps what are some of the human rights, cases or conditions that have been, that these individuals are facing, perhaps?
Yes, precisely. As Diana said, when you do not exist by law, you're extremely vulnerable to abuse, exploitation. You cannot find a job, so you will accept any type of job and any condition, and you will be exploited. And very often, stateless persons also suffer a lot of discrimination. So very vulnerable people, easily manipulated. They can be trafficked, they can be abused, they can be smuggled. So they suffer a whole lot of abuses and human rights violations. The fact that you do not have a nationality is a fundamental human right. Any child, any person born should be entitled to a nationality. And stateless persons are deprived of this fundamental right. And therefore, they're extremely vulnerable. And their basic human rights are violated on a daily basis.
Well said, Catherine. Now, Diana, I'm sure you'll agree with me that these people are stateless because of certain governments who don't want to include them in their country. And perhaps are these governments showing concern? Are they showing some sort of a political will to give these stateless individuals or persons some sort of recognition?
I would say over the years, some governments have further marginalized or entrenched statelessness through administrative practices of how they issue nationality-related documents like birth certificate, national identity cards, or having laws that then will try. Sometimes it's during the attempts to consolidate power. We're looking out some form of opposition, then you will alienate a certain population, render them stateless. But there are governments that have also, in recent days, recognized that statelessness is a gross human rights violation, and they are doing something about it. Kenya recently recognized 1,500 stateless Makondes. You have Cote d'Ivoire that has recognized about 700 people. You have Tanzania that have naturalized a huge population of refugees, though with changing political regimes, then there's risk that those people would be denationalized. But the problem of governments, particularly governments that were under a colonial master, are even deeper, because how nationality laws were inherited from the colonial government were never contextualized to the realities. So if I come to Africa, you had most of the countries as either French colonies or British colonies. Then you had a few that were German colonies, and DRC that was a Belgian colony. So when people left, during that period of colonization, they were in most of the states, there were three forms of identification of citizens. So one, the colonial masters had a superior nationality that was always linked to their mother country. Then you had migrants from Asia who had middle ground, because then they were seen as middlemen, as traders who would facilitate the colonialists and the people who were colonized. Then you had the locals. And what happened, which has had an impact to date, is initially all the issues around nationality, issuance of document, was around labor, control of labor. As a result, the colonialists only needed labor from the men. So the women were left out, and that's how come most countries have had a struggle in allowing women to pass nationality
to their children. Diana, we're going to talk about women issues shortly, but Catherine, let me pose this question. Apparently, the United Nations says that statelessness can be ended within the next decade. Apparently, the United Nations Refugee Agency wants to end statelessness by 2024. But there are critics out there who are saying that this is, the UN is trying to be over-ambitious here. Perhaps what is the UN doing at the moment?
Yes, precisely. There's a global campaign that was launched in 2014 to eradicate statelessness on the face of the globe within the 10 years. It could be ambitious when we look at the numbers, when we look at the complexity of the issues. At the same time, eradicating statelessness is absolutely within the reach of the government. By finding a solution to statelessness, which is providing individuals with a nationality, and making sure that statelessness doesn't occur, that we don't create additional situation of statelessness. If we tackle the two, prevention and response, and there is political will that translates into positive legislative changes, it is actually possible, maybe not to eradicate.
But Catherine, don't you think the current situation in some African countries where we're seeing armed struggle and we're seeing some sort of a political uprising, case in point Ethiopia, we're seeing another development taking place in Togo. Do you think these political situations in these countries might go ahead and increase the number of stateless people out there?
Yeah, there's a link between statelessness and displacement. It can be both a cause and a consequence. But at the same time, it is a political will. Just stateless persons, most of them, have been living in the countries for many years. And they are there to stay. So it is clearly in the interest of the countries to address their country because they will go nowhere. And the mere fact that they remain for generations in a country actually only aggravates the issue. Because stateless persons, despite the fact they don't have documents, they marry, they have children, and they pass on their status as stateless to the next generation. So the phenomenon only grows. If the countries are willing to address statelessness, clearly within 10 years, and now it's less than 10 years because it's already 3 years that COPIN has been launched, significant steps can be done.
Let's talk about the women issue here, Diana. It's something that you've raised earlier. Apparently, statistics indicate that 27 countries, I don't know if the number have changed, the latest statistics indicate that 27 countries don't allow women to pass their nationalities to their children. And some of these countries are in Africa. They include Sudan, Libya, Mauritania, Madagascar, Somalia, even Burundi. So what does this say about women in these countries? And do you think they're being treated as lesser citizens, perhaps?
As lesser citizens, and this is contributed by the very patriarchal nature of society, and like I have alluded, I've alluded to the history of nationality in most of the African states, where it was initially to control labor, and labor was seen as purely a preserve of the male subjects back then. So that then has evolved, and with time, most of the countries, actually there were more than 27, they discriminated women. So women could not pass nationality to their children or to their spouses. Or sometimes in cases of where women are conceived as a result of sexual violation, you would be forced to, like, quote unquote, adopt a father to that child to be able to pass nationality. And it's very discriminatory because it has nothing to do with we are living in a globalized world where we are intermarrying from various countries. And even in the past, we have to recognize that the boundaries we have are not necessarily our own. We didn't make these boundaries. So you have relatives across the other side of the fence, but it happens to be another country that is run by different nationality law. So if we decide to discriminate women on that basis, then we are causing a huge injustice. And as a result of that, this has increased the population of stateless children in the world as a result of women not being able to pass nationality to their spouses.
Yes, let me, Diana, allow me to play back that question to Catherine. And Catherine, apparently 27 countries, Diana says it could be more, that don't allow women to pass their nationalities to their children. I mean, perhaps what is the United Nations doing to make sure, these countries, most of whom are in Africa? I've already mentioned the examples of Sudan, Libya, and Mauritania. What is the UN doing to make sure that these countries change their perception or perhaps their constitution to allow children to get nationalities?
A lot of work is being done in terms of advocacy precisely to engage this country in legislative changes. The law has to change. The law has to be equal between men and women. So it's a lot of advocacy that needs to be done, and it's part of the campaign. That's part of the plans that we have in place in the countries that do indeed discriminate women in terms of nationality laws. And it's about advocacy, explaining the fact that by doing so, the situation will make it worse for the children, and there will be more and more children who will be stateless as a result of the fact that these women are not able to pass non-identical children. So advocacy, explanation, bringing up the consequences, giving a face and a name to what statelessness means. For a lot of countries, it is just a concept. It is an issue. It is not understood as a real human problem. It is very important to give voice to the stateless persons, so for them to explain what it means to be a stateless person on a daily basis. And by doing so, you raise awareness and you raise the level of understanding. And it's a lot of advocacy effort that needs to be made.
Now, Diana, let's bring this conversation home. For example, the Makondas in Kenya, it took them, I don't know, about 50 years for them to be fully recognized since independence. So it seems it takes a lot for government to recognize stateless people.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more that statelessness is one of the human problems and human rights violation that has seen the highest resistance in terms of political will, and even the concession, even gender discrimination has taken a huge amounts of campaign. For the Makonde, it took them a whole 50 years, and they had to do something that most of the communities and people here don't do. They had to trek all the way over 400 kilometers, and luckily that secured political will for the Makonde and other stateless communities in Kenya to have their issues resolved because they were able to secure the highest political organ in Kenya to do something about their nationality. And I would say, compared to other countries in Africa, look at Cote d'Ivoire. It took a war for Cote d'Ivoire to begin to address the issue of statelessness. Lives were lost. They are not yet even there. You can imagine then what it will take for Ethiopia to address the issue of Ethiopians of Eritrean descent. And whereas we can say Kenya, we have secured political will, the other communities who are stateless in Kenya, like the Pemba, the Shona, and descendants from Rwanda and Burundi are yet to be recognized to date.
And then I'm sure you'll agree with me that those, perhaps maybe from the northern part of this country, still struggle to get critical documents like that, like an ID. So
there are people who are stateless, completely stateless, like what the Makonde were. But like most of the communities, the Kenyan Somali, the process for them to get national identity card, birth certificates, passports are very different from the rest of Kenya. So they are treated in a very different way, and you're not sure when that will change. Their population is increasing, so you can't say they're a minority anymore. This is a huge population that is being left out. Look at the Nubian community who've lived here for over 100 years. So they've even lived here longer than the Makonde. They do not live along
clearly, Dana, there are a lot of different examples in Kenya alone. But now let's talk about numbers here, Catherine. Apparently, the numbers of stateless people in the world has been put at 10 million plus. I would like to know if the UNHCR has a rough number of stateless people in Africa. And as Dan has already mentioned, that these are people who are not recognized by governments, then they're not subject to census. So how accurate is this number that is being thrown around?
Exactly so. It is very difficult, actually, to give a precise number. In most of the countries, they are never census. They are not known. They live completely under the radar screen of the government. Some communities might not even know they are stateless because, again, they are very discriminated. Some of them live in remote areas where they don't have access to services. So this 10 million is a very global estimate. It could be more. In Africa, it's several million. I mean, I don't exactly have the breakdown, but it's clearly several million. And it's between Asia and Africa that we find the largest number of stateless communities. In Kenya, we have a rough number of 18,500. Again, it could be more. I've tried with the government to map out, to collect data So we have, yes, some data, some fairly reliable data for some groups, the Pembas, the Shonas, but out there, there are groups that it's very difficult to quantify.
Yes.
So, but again, it's not necessarily an issue of number.
Mm-hmm.
It is an issue of individuals whose fundamental rights are being violated, who continue to suffer, who continue to face great injustice. And this is what matters. The numbers do not matter. What numbers is the human suffering behind this number.
Catherine, I think that will serve as a final comment. Diana, as you make your final comment, perhaps on the numbers on these other issues, we're seeing, increased armed conflicts in several African countries. We're seeing political uprising, and definitely this will lead to, people losing their documents as they flee these countries. Mm-hmm. Do you believe that the United Nations is going to end statelessness by the year 2024, as they've already indicated?
I know that UNHCR has put up a very vibrant campaign. Mm-hmm. Definitely, it's very ambitious because we still have emerging cases of statelessness. But whatever we can do to deal with the existing cases and reduce further cases of statelessness in future is very, very critical. And particularly for Africa, it's not just the UN mechanism. The AU must step up and come up with context-specific solution. Let us define nationality from an African context. Let us stop just limiting nationality to issues of blood mm-hmm. or the soil where you're born, and broaden it to the historical connection, to the very nature of our Ubuntu, so that at the end of the day, every human being is accorded an opportunity to live a dignified life, and a dignified life can never be a stateless
Thank you very much, Diana. Diana Gishengo is the Program Manager, Kenya Human Rights Commission. And thank you as well, Catherine Harmon-Sharp, a representative from the UN.